Hello, I'm the Elder Man. I'm reading Scandinavian fairy tales, sagas, and folktales. Today, I'm reading about the Changelings. Once there lived a king and queen who had no children, although they dearly wished for one. At last one summer, the queen gave birth to a daughter, and the king and queen were indescribably happy. The little princess was christened Bianca Maria. Her eyes were big and blue, her little mouth turned up sweetly, and her skin was as delicate as the petal of a flower. The noblest lady in the land, Countess Esmeralda, was entrusted with the role of governess. But despite being so aristocratic, she was not at all suited to being a governess. She was very old and always sleepy. In daytime, the countess looked after the infant, and time again she would nod off, although she always said she was only resting her eyes. At night, two nurses slept by the cradle, one on each side, in a big bedchamber. During the day, her cradle were carried to an acacia grove near the palace, where a fountain splashed, and the tall trees dropped their white flowers on the princess's coverlet. The air was mild and fresh, and white pigeons flew from their coop to look at the sleeping child. "She's so sweet," they cooed, tripping silently around the cradle. But one day something terrible happened. Behind the cradle, in a thick forest on the mountain, a troll and his wife lived in a cave. Now this troll wife had just also given birth to a little girl, a small baby with keen eyes and matted hair. One day the old troll went to the palace fountain to fetch some water. He padded along so quietly that no one would hear him. Countess Esmeralda was fast asleep in a big easy chair by the cradle. The pigeon was tripping over the gravel, cooing, "Isn't she lovely?" The troll crept cautiously up to the cradle and looked through the silk curtains at the sleeping child. Then he went home and told his wife all about the little princess. "I have seen the child that I would like to have." "You couldn't be the father of that child," said the troll wife, showing all her green teeth. "A big troll makes a little troll, and must be satisfied with that." But all the time now, the old troll was thinking about the little princess, until it finally was too much for him. "Wife," he said, "let's steal the royal baby. The old crone who watches her is always snoring. We can easily take the princess and put our troll Midge in her place." At first his wife was against it. She was only an ugly old troll, yet she loved her own child. However, at last she was so tired of his nagging day and night that she pulled the baby troll from its cradle, wrapped it in a rag, and said, "Go along, take your child, but I warn you, don't come back empty-handed." The old troll ran back to the acacia grove as fast as he could. The pigeons were tripping around the acacias, were dropping flowers. Countess Esmeralda was snoring softly in a deep chair, and there was the golden cradle. In a trice, the troll ripped off the curtains, snatched the princess, put his troll baby in her place, and then ran faster than a hare up the mountain with his precious bundle. The countess awoke and noticed nothing. She believed the princess was asleep. After a while, the queen came into the grove. She liked to walk there in the mornings and see her baby. Imagine her horror when she leaned over the cradle and found not the dearest Bianca Maria, but a little troll bundle staring up at her with small, keen eyes. She cried out, nearly fainting, "Where is my child? This is not the little princess." Countess Esmeralda started in horror. "Not your majesty's child," she said. "Who else's child could it be? No one has been here, not a soul. I have been here wide awake the whole time." Countess Esmeralda did not mean to lie, for she did not know how often she fell asleep. The king and his court were summoned, and the royal physician was asked for his advice. "A very strange case," he said, "but it will probably pass." He prescribed sweet milk baths, and told them to lay the baby on a bed of violets, and then surely it would not be long before she looked the way she did before. The finest cows were bought, and the child was bathed in a warm, creamy milk. The cradle was filled with violets, which smelled heavenly. But the queen did not find the child at all changed. All the court, however, said she looked perfectly sweet and enchanting, until finally the queen too thought the same. Still, every time she actually saw her, she would sigh and think, "This is not my angel, my little Bianca Maria." In the meantime, the old troll had run home to his cave with the little princess. "Isn't she sweet?" he asked, opened the shawl. His troll wife threw him a scornful look. "Such a miserable little thing. She looks like a leek, long and thin. But you wanted her, so now you will have to put up with her." They laid the baby in the troll child's cradle, but the pillows and mattresses were stuffed with coarse straw and a few thistles. When Bianca Maria felt this hard and prickly bed, she began to cry bitterly. "Why is she crying?" the troll wife asked. But her husband was already running down to a peat bog, where he gathered cotton grass, and then on the mountainside he picked wild thyme. With these he stuffed a new mattress for the cradle, and then everything was soft and fragrant around the little one. She stopped crying and fell quietly asleep. In the castle, the troll princess grew up into a very strange child. She had no troll name. Trolls simply arrive in the world, and their father spits on their neck and says, "Out with you into the world, you little cribble-crabble," and that is all there is to it. But the queen could not bring herself to call the changeling Bianca Maria. She only called her Black Eye, for the troll baby had a pair of flashing black eyes. "Where did our daughter get her strange eyes?" asked the king, staring at the queen. "Yes, you can explain it," she said, and sighed. Nor was little Black Eye easy to manage. She gave the king and queen and the whole court trouble. When she didn't get what she wanted, she lay on the floor on her back and kicked her feet in the air and screamed until they had to close the windows to keep her from being heard outside. If she was given a new dress, she found it funny to pour soup all over it, or else to pierce it with a poker and make a big hole. Then she would look out of the corner of her eye at the queen to see how angry she would get. She behaved worse, however, to old Countess Esmeralda. She could not stand the Countess, and would sprinkle sand in her hair when she fell asleep in a chair, or hide her shoes in a bush. Sometimes she hid too, and had a wonderful time when the Countess woke from a little nap and could not find her. She would creep behind bush after bush for hours on end, while the Countess tottered about with her cane, trembling and out of breath from looking for her. Surprisingly, the king had a soft spot for his obstinate child, which he soon enough took advantage of. Black Eye was not more than 8 years old when one day at the dinner table, after listening to something the king had said, she pulled his beard playfully and cheekily said, "Is that so, old Father King?" "I suppose some might think so." The queen became quite red and looked at her husband in alarm, but the king put his arm around the girl's waist and laughed. "You are the worst little child in the whole world." Among the trolls up in the mountain, Bianca Maria was also 8 years old. She was tall and thin for her age, and had soft, long yellow hair. She obeyed the trolls in everything, for she believed they were her parents, although she often felt in her heart that she did not love them as much as she should. To the old troll, she was still the very sweetest thing imaginable. When he talked with her, he would cock his head, kiss her finger, and squeak like a little rat. "Don't be silly, you ugly old scamp," his wife said, and smacked his hand hard. She had no soft spot for the king's daughter. Indeed, it annoyed her that Bianca Maria was always so mild and obliging, and said yes to everything she asked her to do. One day the troll wife called to the girl angrily. "Yes, this and yes, that. You always say yes. Can't you say no, you wretch?" But Bianca Maria did not mind. She went quietly about her work and said nothing in the face of scolding. Even as a little child, he was given work to do. She went on bare feet deep into the forest to a bubbling well to fetch water for the kitchen. In the forest, birches rusted in such a friendly way, and the pines murmured so courteously that Bianca Maria made all the trees her friends. And how she loved all the forest animals. Little squirrels darted up with their tails in the air to stare at her. "Out so early?" they said, sitting on their hind legs. "Do you by chance have some nuts or something good in your pocket?" And Bianca Maria had always brought nuts or acorns, which the squirrels ate from her hand. She knew every bird in the forest, and could have told you immediately if it was a chaffinch or siskin chirping in the branches. She stood still and listened to the song of the thrushes and the quiet cooing of the wood pigeons. It was not only forest animals that Bianca Maria liked. She was also friendly to the big toads that waddled into the mountain cave. Even though they were very wet and unpleasant to touch, Bianca Maria would pick them up carefully behind her small fingers and whisper, "Poor thing, don't come in here, or they will kill you with a broomstick." And then she would set the toads down the grass. Bianca Maria did not even mind rats. She saved grain in an old earthenware jug that she put on the floor behind her bed, and at night the rats came running and squeaked. One day the old woman caught 2 wood pigeons. She killed them, plucked their feathers, and put them in a pot. Bianca wept, and the troll wife became very angry. "Well, I never," she cried, "to howl over a couple of miserable pigeons. You will never be a big, daring troll child. I cannot understand where you came from." Of course, the troll woman knew very well. Her husband had strictly forbidden her to ever let Bianca know she was the daughter of a king. Years passed, and before long, the 2 girls were each 17 years old. The troll princess had become strangely handsome. She was not tall, but she was slim and striking, and her raven black hair fell in waves and curls about her face. Her big black eyes would probably have been beautiful had they ever expressed a little friendliness or kindness, but instead they stared crossly at everyone. When she was angry, her eyes flamed, and people were afraid to look at them. And when she was pleased, they seemed to express ridicule and squirm. She looked down on everyone, and the older she grew, the meaner she became. She boxed the servants' ears and stuck pins in her maid when she was being dressed. If Countess Esmeralda dared to scold her, she would reply, "Why would I listen to you? You're too old. Sit still and go to sleep in your chair. Leave me alone. I'm going to do exactly as I like." And so she had all her own way. Sometimes she did not want to get up, so spent the whole day with a blanket pulled around her ears. If someone tiptoed into her room to see if she was awake, she would shout, "Get out of here and leave me alone." Sometimes she rose before sunrise, while the mist still covered the meadows and the morning star was still in the sky. She would walk to the stable, wake the groom by pulling his hair, make him saddle the wildest horse, and ride out alone. "I don't want a lout like you at my heels," she told the groom as she swung into the saddle. She galloped so fast, she swept through the forest like a whirlwind. As she rode, she hallooed and shouted so loudly that all the hares and foxes and deer and squirrels fled before her. One day, the troll princess came home so wet and red in the face from her headstrong ride that the king asked her earnestly to be more careful. At this she became so angry that she cracked a large mirror with the handle of her riding crop. The broken glass rained down like icicles, and the king paled and left the room. Neither he nor the king could manage her, so they decided to marry her off as soon as possible. "Perhaps she will be a better wife than a daughter," said the king, though the queen herself doubted it. They chose the noblest and handsomest young duke in the realm to be her husband. He was enormously flattered to be betrothed to the king's only daughter, so he did not ask questions, only bowed deeply and said, "My most humble thanks." The princess found the young duke handsome, and she was so sweet and mild in his presence that he thought she was an angel. In time, preparations began for the wedding. It was not long, however, before she began to show her true character. The young Duke was amazed. He had never expected to see a princess slap her servants and cuff the ears of her ladies-in-waiting, and one day she even struck out her tongue at old Countess Esmeralda in front of him. "Princess," he said with dismay, and his eye flashed angrily. But Black Eye turned on him and cried, "A princess is permitted to do as she likes. And don't pull a long face. Remember, I am of better birth than you." He became more and more capricious before the young Duke. Sometimes she turned her back on him and said, "Go away. I can't bear the sound of your voice." At other times, she found 1,000 faults with him. If they went riding together, it amused her to gallop so fast that he could not possibly keep up. She would wait for him at the castle gate and laugh at his return. "Poor boy, haven't you ever ridden a horse before?" The next day, butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, and she would say to him, little sweetheart darling, handsome charming Duke child," and flash her black eyes at him. "You are like a honeycomb, and I could eat you up." And she would open her mouth as if she wanted to bite him. The young Duke became more and more nervous about his royal bride-to-be. He would have liked to run away, but his father would not permit it. "Even if she were the meanest old troll witch," the father said, "it is a rare honor to be chosen as the bridegroom of the princess. She is, after all, the king's daughter." By now, Bianca had also grown into a young maiden, and one day the old troll said to his wife, It is time to present our daughter at the troll court. I'm very proud of her and want all the trolls to see what a beautiful daughter we have. Let us hope they don't realize that you stole her, for she looks no more like you or me than a wood pigeon resembles a toad." But the old troll was firm, and one midsummer evening they took Bianca deep into the forest to a big mountain cave, where the king of the trolls lived and was holding a great ball. The cave was so crowded and smelled so pungently of trolls that Bianca stepped back from the entrance. But the troll woman gave her a shove and said, "Don't be coy now. Show a little troll sense." And so Bianca stepped into the hall. The king and queen sat on thrones at the back of the cave, decked out with so much glitter and gold that they could hardly move. The wizened old king was as strange as a wind-bent tree, and he had a long and magnificent tail decorated with gold tassels and precious stones. The queen looked like a large boat. Their only son, the thin, spindly crowned prince of the trolls, stood next to the throne. When he saw Bianca, he smiled and showed 2 rows of pointed yellow teeth. Trolls of all sizes and shapes stood along the walls. Some were furry as bear cubs, others were pale and miserable looking. Some had the bulging eyes of a fish. There were trolls transparent as green glass, and others that had no heads but spoke from their stomachs. Yet all were in high spirits. They laughed and shouted and made as much noise as a cat fight at night. And then the music began. The musicians could not be seen. That would not have been considered elegant. But you could hear them just the same. Trumpets blew and drums rolled, and the shrill notes of the flutes rang through the air like the pangs of a toothache. It was absolutely magnificent. At first the trolls danced quietly, but it was not long before they all began to jump up and down, do somersaults, or wriggle as wildly as snakes. They thumped about in such a jumble that Bianca could hardly tell one troll from another. Suddenly the crown prince came toward her, bowed deeply, and asked her to dance. He began to jump and leap like a grasshopper, flapping his big troll ears and grinning to show his teeth. Bianca turned cold with fear. The mountain cave became warmer and warmer, and soon she felt so dizzy she sank to the floor in a faint. "Wake up!" shouted her troll mother, splashing water on her face. "Think how happy you will be if you become the crown prince's bride. One day you will be queen of all the trolls in the forest." Indeed, the crown prince of the trolls had fallen head over heels in love with Bianca, and before the summer was out, their wedding was set to take place. You can imagine how sad that made Bianca. She had no fancy notions about herself, and becoming the wife of the troll crown prince and living in a horrible cave with such a monster was too terrible to think of. From that day on, Bianca thought only of ways to escape. The troll princess felt the same way. She was tired of her fiancé, the duke, and he was more afraid of her than ever. When he had introduced her to his noble parents, she had yawned so loudly at the table and then danced so wildly in the evening, kicking her legs in the air and letting out shrill hunting calls, that the duke and the duchess were very angry. Black Eye herself was so bored with them that she decided then and there never to marry into this noble family that stared at her whenever she moved and was embarrassed by her every whim. She wanted to go out in the wide world and discover new and exciting things, far from the king and queen and the royal court. Her wedding day was set for the middle of August, the same day that Bianca was to become the bride of the troll prince. Early that morning, when the grass was still, covered with dew, both girls slipped into the forest. By chance, they passed close to each other in a grove of hazel bushes. Bianca heard something rustle in the grove and thought, "It is a fox sneaking through." The troll princess stood still and listened and thought, "It is a wood pigeon fluttering there." Yet they did not meet. Bianca followed the road until she came to the acacias in the palace garden where the trolls had stolen her. The queen was standing by the fountain watching the splashing water, but her thoughts were far away. She was remembering her dear sweet little Bianca Maria as a baby, and what a happy mother she had been then. Suddenly, before the queen stood a girl so like herself at 17 that she uttered a cry of surprise. And Bianca realized almost at the same time that this was her own mother holding her arms open to her. "My own Bianca Maria," said the queen. Bianca threw herself into the queen's arms and for the first time knew what it was like to be hugged to a mother's heart. Then she told the queen of her life among the trolls, and the queen realized what had happened. But they could no longer ask old Countess Imelda about it, for she slept too deeply now for snoring. She had died some weeks ago. Yet neither the king nor anyone else could doubt that Bianca was the queen's own daughter. She resembled the queen down to her fingertips and delicate ears. In the forest, Black Eye came to the cave of the old troll. The old troll mother was chopping hard green wood, and she swore terrible as she did so. The troll girl burst out laughing. "That's right," she called. "When you don't like something, just say so." The troll mother looked up and caught sight of the girl. Immediately she realized it was her own daughter. "My own wild baby," she cried, holding out her arms. Lovingly, the troll mother began to rumble the girl's hair. "See here," she said suddenly. "Here is the twins' little curl no human being can comb straight. Isn't it so?" And the girl laughed. She remembered all the trouble they're gone to at the palace to try to comb this one little twist tuft of hair that lay hidden under all the rest. "Let me kiss you, my chick," said the troll mother, giving her daughter a hearty smack. So it came about that the young duke took Bianca as her bride at the same time that the troll girl married the troll prince. So she would one day be queen of all the trolls. Both weddings were celebrated with great magnificence. That evening, as Bianca and the bridegroom rode through the forest to the duke's castle, they saw a large fire burning deep among the trees. Smoke and sparks whirled into the night sky, and wild cries and shouts rent the air. They rode on, out into open countryside, and behind them the fire slowly died down, and the sparks disappeared. But high in the sky, millions of stars shone on, never to be extinguished. At the castle, the duke lifted his young bride from the saddle and walked in hand with her towards their life together. That, my friends, was the Swedish saga of the Changelings. Thank you for listening. Until next time, bye-bye.